Good evening. Welcome inside the Midlife Pilot podcast, episode number 5. Tonight we're going to be talking all about flying with nervous and first-time passengers and people who just maybe aren't quite as comfortable in the airplane as you are. It should be a good show, and I'm glad you're here. My name is Chris Moran, also known as the Midlife Pilot on YouTube, and as always, I am excited and delighted to be joined tonight by my friend and yours, all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. Give it up for Brian Siskind. Brian Siskind.
What is up? How you doing?
I'm good, sir. How are you doing?
Man, we made it through first phase holidays. Now we're going to enter second phase. If we get through that, we'll be good. So yeah, I'm just excited to get out. I'm ready for warm weather again. I'm ready for like this. We're still descending into darkness. I'm not enjoying it, but I have been able to get a little bit of flying in. I imagine a little bit more than you, from what I understand.
Yeah, it's been slow going for me. People may have noticed the lack of video content and also just lack of. It's been a little crazy. Got a lot going on. There'll be stuff coming about that on the channel. Stuff that's been happening. It's all good. I mean, you know, it's good to be busy. I live a busy life generally, and I always find myself complaining about it. And I think it's a lot better than the alternative. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
All of my complaints are squarely in the first world problem type level complaints.
Yeah, as I was talking about before we started, you know, I think it's ridiculous that I find myself in a state of being now where I'm angry that I don't have a plane, not just longing to have a plane. I'm like, damn it, I need a plane.
Yeah, I know.
One day, this is going to happen. You know, it's good to have goals. I do have the I got a piece of paper over here showing it. I did buy the N number for the plane that I don't have yet.
Oh, did you really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, you can. You too can pay $10 a year to remind yourself what a failure you are. And so that's what I did. But I got it. The number is 321 Juliet Sierra. My dad's name was John, so John Siskind, and then and his birthday was March 21st.
I'll be darned.
So it's his birthday and his initials. So, you know, this is how sad it is, Chris. My wife actually just gave me a little while ago a little Cessna Christmas ornament for our tree, and it was like, well, I guess I could write the number on that.
Pulls out the Sharpie and like,
right. That's the best I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But one day.
Baby steps.
That's right.
What else has been happening? I don't think I have flown since we talked the last episode. Pretty sure I have not. You have, I think. I mean, I can't track with how current your videos are.
I do them really quickly.
Okay.
I pretty much, because I'm not really making real videos like you are, you know what I mean, that are actually thoughtful. I'm just recording the flights and then cutting them and throwing, I don't, there's no narration. There's no, here's what I'm, doing today or anything. It's, I mean, I guess I could probably try harder, but, that's why I'm able to get them out pretty quick. So, yeah, I have done some decent flying. I actually got to fly with another pilot that's a newer pilot. That was an interesting experience and a good experience. It's interesting to sort of see what people pick up in their training that's still fresh for them, and then maybe what things you're like, wait, I don't actually do that, So that was a good experience. And then also I've done some, just bounce around, new airports and, those kind of things. And I've definitely flown with some people over the last month or so, several actually, that had varied levels of anxiety, whether they were natively anxious people before flying or during, or hopefully not just after, but anyway, I've had some really good experiences, I think, with that. And I think that I just thought that would be a great thing to talk about because, it's something that you get some of this in your training, but it's not a lot. And there's a lot of little sensibilities and things, tips and tricks, kind of, I like all the conventional wisdom that I hear from other people about this topic and how to put people at ease, how to, deal with the motion sickness or, all the various things that can come up. And I know we've touched on this a little bit. You've never had anybody actually full on get motion sick in your plane, have you?
I have not. Not. You did make me think of something though a second ago. You said you flew with other pilots. I lied. I have flown since our last episode. In fact, I flew with another pilot. And it was also struck me how rare it is that I do that. And I think I should do this more often, especially in my circumstance where I have the flying club that I run and I'm surrounded by other pilots who are in this club. We should go out more with each other because I think it's always cool to just be in the airplane with other people and see how they do things. And but I flew with another pilot in our flying club named Dave, and we took the 235 out and did like 12 landings or something crazy at Clarksburg, and I needed a few at night. So we did, I was still current technically, but was not going to be. And so we nailed a few of those at night, but it was as busy. There was a 737. We have very few, commercial flights at Clarksburg. There are a handful in and out every day, but we were leaving. It was nighttime already. And we got the call, which I love. We were departing a downwind departure, and it was like, she called us out and said, traffic is at your, 9 o'clock, 737 on a right base for runway 21. So basically like T-boning towards us. It's like we look out and there's their landing light. It's like the sun, coming at you, and same altitude. So we were right in the pattern with a 737 when we left Clarksburg. And then when we came into Fairmont, there was another airplane that we never had communication with we had to avoid, and do something completely crazy and fly over the field. And we actually flew a backwards pattern. It's left traffic, but the way it worked out to get away from it, we had to cross the field and we ended up in a right downwind. So we just made right traffic while we were there. But it was, so it was a pretty cool experience. Like we spent about an hour in the plane with somebody, and he took a couple landings from the right seat, and, it was cool.
Does it seem weird for you when you fly right pattern?
It's still, yes, but no, not as a general rule, but in like at places that you never do it, like when it's like Fairmont is left traffic to 2-3, and it was like we just made a decision because it was like late and like empty to go ahead and just continue in the right pattern. We announced what we were doing, but it was we felt like a safer option than crossing back over the airport again. And we were already there, so like let's just. But it's very weird at Fairmont. It's not. I mean, it's just. Yeah, no, that was very strange.
Yeah, the runway that I primarily fly here is right traffic. And so training in that environment and doing, 90% of my pattern work in right traffic, it's still something for me to get used to do normal pattern work.
Right.
But it's all good.
In terms of passengers and comfort levels, so I've been I guess part of it is I don't have a ton of experience with a ton of different passengers. So that's kind of the first thing. I probably only flown with, maybe 10 different people since I've got my certificate. So the sample size of of people too have, nerve issues or be, anxious is pretty slim. I think it's natural to be a little bit. I mean, it's an unusual thing we're asking people to do.
You really find out who your friends are, don't you? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and who trusts you.
How many hours do you have? Oh.
I think this is the thing that I've read about that I think makes the most sense to me in terms of why people maybe are apprehensive about getting in the plane with someone who after they get their pilot certificate. And I think it's a fair point. People have known you all your life. As not being a pilot, and then suddenly we're supposed to just believe that you are one. Right. You know what I mean? It's like there's something about pilots that's held in a certain level of regard, and it's like, well, you can't just become one of those. It's like you are one, or you're not. I don't know. That's not true, but I think that's some of the reluctance that people have is like, I've known you all your life. You've never been a pilot, and now you are.
Yeah, it's kind of like now you're a cop,
right?
Yeah, or something. Not that not they're equivocal, but just. All of a sudden, you were just in this position of governance over the situation that is unique.
Yeah.
And they have to accept it. And that's maybe a little strange for people. I've had a lot of people say like, it's kind of like you're realizing your true self. Like you're really at home in this scenario, and they just don't realize all the paper clips and rubber bands up here that are kind of springing loose. But no, I mean, it's definitely a weird thing. And, you know, so I have friends that are in the entertainment industry that, are on the road a lot, and, you know, they'll be on buses and planes and traveling around, which I consider to be fairly high risk, you know, tour buses and that kind of thing. Right. I mean, you're not in a seatbelt, you know, and you're just kind of in this tube going down the same highway that every other crazy person is. But even still, like I have one friend who said, his wife specifically told him that he's not allowed to fly with me or, you know, come up in the plane with me until he's got his life insurance sorted out. And I was like, oh, geez, like what a dire reminder of what we're doing here.
I think, so I think about through my list of passengers and folks that I've had in the plane, and some of them have been, in fact, my first ever passenger is actually in the chat with us while we're recording this live. Kevin is here. He was my first ever passenger, although he's not an adventurer, but I mean, he's also not super fearful of things. And so he was super down for this. His brother also is a professional, is a airline, pilot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he, you know, has a general understanding of aviation. But he was my first passenger, and that was fun. But he was equally engaged. I think what helps, and I especially I've done this with people who show an interest in what we're doing. I think the engagement factor is key. I think there are some people who just want to go up for sightseeing and want to look out the window the whole time and just see things, and that's cool too. But the ones I found that have the most fun with it are the ones that I can engage the most in the process. Like,
yes.
I give them something to do. They can ask. They're always asking questions about what things are, and I think the more you talk about it and they're actively involved in the process, not only is it, I think, interesting, but I think it's somewhat comforting, because I think it shows a certain level of not just they're learning what's happening, but also that you understand. I mean, you know, you have a pretty good handle on what you're doing.
Yeah, my last flight was very much like that. It's a former colleague of mine who's we used to work in sort of an IT capacity together many years ago, and he's gone on to do, you know, he runs a whole DevOps group and does all this stuff now. And he's very technical, but he'd never been in a small plane ever. And so it was definitely a helpful thing to be able to just nerd out over the details of what's going on. He told me beforehand, you know, I'm a little anxious, just so you know. And I was like, no, that's good. Like, I think that's one of the main things. Maybe that's where we can kind of dig into this a little bit, is like, I think it's really important. And what I have found is I've got no shame in asking people right away, a week beforehand that we were even planning to fly together or whatever it is. Do you have any anxiety about this? That's fine if you do. Or do you have any history of motion sickness? Or just polling the situation when you're not at the airport and there's the pressure of let's go. So I think that's one of the things I've figured out in my limited experience so far that's good, is just to not be shy about asking people. I've had one experience where it was all, you know, sort of like, yeah, man, no, I'm all good, no problem. And then we got into it, and we were maybe 10 minutes into the flight, and it was like, well, okay, so I do get a little motion sick, and I think I'm starting to feel a little bit that way, you know. And so I changed the entire destination plan, everything that we were doing. Still had a great time, but I just worked a break. I landed at a pretty nearby airport and didn't take them on a long spin or do a bunch of crazy stuff. Okay. But anyway, and that was one of those where you let them fly and then they're good, which is I've heard that that's a solution. Boy, is it really effective. It's really good. I bet a lot of CFIs rely on that one.
That's cool. Yeah, I think that's all good. You know, another advantage that you and I have, and maybe some others who film their flights have, I like to give links to flights to people and say, hey, check one of these out. Like, that's just to give them an idea of what you're going to, you know, they don't show up completely in the dark and worrying about what they don't know. I think it's a great head start for them to be able, and if you don't record your flights, send them a video of someone else who does, you know, maybe
the midlife pilot.
A midlife pilot would be a great example. There's, you know, millions of them, millions of videos of small aircraft flights. I think anytime you go into a situation less blind, it just takes the edge off. And certainly in this case, I think that's probably true.
Yeah. I think also there's just different, it's kind of like get people to define what they're anxious about. Because sometimes it's more of just a blanket kind of anxiety versus I'm very, what I learned when I probed about that with some of my passengers that had maybe some anxieties, they really were actually only concerned about the landing. That was the only part that they just could not anticipate how that was going to feel, or whether that was going to feel out of control in some way, or anything like that. And my buddy asked me, he's like, "Are you good at landing?" Like, well, I mean,
depends on the day.
I've made it this far, so far it's one of those things you're going to do great until you're not. But
was it your latest video I was watching? Was it your latest video I was watching? Oh yeah, it was. I was going to rib you and also give you kudos about your go around decision. I was like, I remember going around when things were like that. I don't do that. I don't do it anymore. Right. I was like, I looked at those wheels. I thought you're like a foot off the ground. Like,
yeah.
But it's first of all, it's excellent practice to go around. So like,
yeah,
especially close to the ground. Those are the ones that people have. We're off topic now, but the go arounds super close to touchdown at super low air speeds are the ones people screw up. They're the ones where people either like apply pull power, put carb heat in and pull up and climb out of ground effect and they're too slow, or they pull the flaps up and they're too slow out of ground effect. And I mean, so anytime you get a chance to practice those where you're just about touchdown speed, just off the runway and can go full power and practice that, that's good practice.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things too that you can't, it's such a luxury, like in terms of, I'm not doubting you. Like that was an easily fixable landing that you're talking about. That was a couple of videos ago. And the thing about it is I remember when I was training, and my instructor saying, if you could have just padded that with a little bit of throttle. If you ballooned that a little bit, just throw in a little throttle and you'll be fine. And I said, look, that's fine. But I don't want to be good at fixing landings. I want to be good at landing. There's some reason why that situation occurred. And I don't want to keep developing all these skills that give me the lack of impetus to really solve the airspeed problem or whatever else it is that I've got that's going on, however minute the problem is. But in that particular landing, it was one of those where the benefit of quarterbacking it, looking at video from the outside of the plane after, right? But it is like sometimes it's like you're kind of feeling for the ground, you're kind of feeling for it, and your speed is really starting to drop, but you're still feeling for it, and you're also you're trying to manage back pressure to where you're not going to really force it up. So you're kind of just coming down and and I got down like right there, and then I was like, and I pulled it back a little bit much, and it kind of went like this, and I was like, before I even begin the slightest balloon, I'm already sort of starting to, because I was about to just put in a little bit of power and just I was right. Yeah. I was like this high, but I felt strange because I felt in the moment I'm feeling for the ground and I'm like, what's going on? As soon as I'm even distracted for like 0.7 seconds in that process at that stage, I just go around. I love it. Give me the go around.
I had a learning experience. I did in all the landings we did the other night. It was I decided to do a power off 180 in the 235. So like they're super fun in the 172 because it's basically like pull the power out, smoke a cigarette,
right.
Chew some gum, have a snack, talk to your passenger, and then think about turning back to the airport to land. In the 235, it's like if you're a beam, your touchdown point, and you pull the power out, if you're not turning towards the runway, I'm talking in like a calm wind situation. If you're not turning towards the runway in about 2 seconds, you're not going to make it back. That's how much that thing falls out of the sky with no power. And so I had learned that in one of our first flights with Kevin when he was checking me out in the plane. So I intentionally gave myself the time factor where I would be like, what is happening? I waited a beat or two and then kind of started turning towards the runway. So at Clarksburg, here are the things to think about. Now we're way off topic, but here are the things to think about. At Clarksburg, on the left side of the runway, probably, I don't know, 1,000 feet or between 1,000 and 2,000 feet down the runway, right on the left-hand side of the runway is a tower, probably a 75-foot. It's either part of the ILS. I don't know what it is. It's some sort of a structure. Because I'm always thinking, like, we've got an 8,000 foot runway here. I don't also need to hit the numbers. Why can't I just turn into a low approach and kind of be there? Well, I can't. You have to be aware of the obstacles near the runway. So, like, I couldn't even think about cutting it short. Anyway, point is, I turned in super early, and I'm like, I'm going to make it. And Dave is like, oh, I don't know if you're going to make it. I said, dude, I'm beyond the point. I've got too much speed, and I got to figure out what I'm going to do now. And so I got to play with this thing in the 235 where, like, we're best glide. I'm trying to pull back a little bit because I know I'm going to make it now. So I'm slowing down before we get there. And I ripped in all flaps. Like, I was just like, click, click, like all the way to 40 degrees. So I anticipated. And
it's got 40. Okay.
Yeah, it's 15. I'm sorry, 10, 25, and 40 are the three notches. So it goes 10, okay. 40. Well, so it slows down quick. With 40 degrees of flaps. And so it was perfect. I mean, everything worked out perfectly, but it was it was a really cool game of feeling that out, like how to fly. Like, it was completely now. It was just flying now. Like, there was no thinking about all of the parameters. You were just kind of feeling the airplane and flying it. And it was super cool. And we were a little bit longer than I wanted to be, but we clearly made it back safely. But it was a good learning experience.
Yeah, so it's got to be very, very different than a 172. It's sort of like driving a Suburban versus a Corolla.
Exactly. One Dog Geek says, "Gotta love the Hershey bar wings. Throw a brick out the window and follow it down." That's exactly what it feels like. When you pull power, and you're in the 172 and you pull power out, it still feels. I mean, the nose gets heavy, a little heavier, but it still feels like it's gliding. Brian, I can't explain to you the feeling. Like, when you pull it out of the 235, it's like you've got to, like, grab and hold on to the thing, because it's just like it's just falling over. Like, it's just the sink is unbelievable without power in that plane, which is something to be aware of at all times, like on takeoff.
Yeah. Oh, and just one thing to step back about the go round thing is I wanted to mention is that I made sure to tell my slightly nervous passenger who was nervous about landing. I made sure to tell him well beforehand, before we were into it, that about what a go round is, and that it's a badge of honor. It's not a shameful. It's not a thing that's negative. In any way. It's, you come in. Sometimes things will happen. I basically said, if anything doesn't look right, I'll say I'm going around, and I'll put the throttle in, and then we'll do another lap around, and we'll try it again. So just to let them know ahead of time. It's one thing to let the airsick people know, like, I'm about to turn right, okay, like everybody said. Yeah. It's another thing to be like, 10 miles out from the airport, I'm already telling him about how the pattern's going to go, and then how. And it's just a reminder that I always default to the go round, that's what I'm going to do.
Right.
So, and by having that as a mental sort of fixture in my brain about that's my default is the go around, then that actually led me to also then by default, when I'm telling my passenger about the landing, let me tell you about the go round we're going to do, if anything looks weird. So, and if everything's okay, then we'll land. That kind of approach, I think, worked really, really well.
That is good discipline. Yeah. That is good discipline. And I probably need to be a little bit, I get spoiled in places. Now, I guess Fairmont, not so much. Like, you have to be reasonably, it's also, we act like it's a super short runway. It's almost 3,000 feet. I mean, you still could land halfway down the thing and be fine, So it's not like any of us are working in precision, like backcountry, like you got 800 feet to get this thing in. Not a
sandbar. Yeah.
And it's the same thing at Clarksburg, but times 10, it's 8,000 feet. And it's like, who cares? You could get complacent and be like, I don't care. I don't care where I land. I'll fight this landing for 5,000 feet if I have to, but I'll just put it down. But it is probably better. The approach is probably better to be thinking like, I should go up and practice. If I've got the time to do this, and this is, if it's a safe condition, land the plane. I mean, there's also not like a problem if you're fine to land it, but like go out and do it again and get it right this time. And it's good practice. I mean,
and the thing too is that the whole idea is to try to be as good of a pilot as you can be and as safe as pilot as you can be. And so I'm just hell bent to understand why am I in this position now? Even if it's very subtle and I'm just not quite getting it. It's funny how our whole podcast now is about go rounds, but basically that's what it's all about.
I was looking for your video to show it, but
it's like the third to last one or something. It's got, but anyway, so the other thing I wanted to mention about, nervous passengers and all that, I feel like, there's a way, the safety briefing, which by the way, I kind of keep forgetting that it's actually a regulation that you have to give a safety brief to a passenger. I've always just thought about it as being this kind of, it's just a responsible thing to do. It's like, no, it's actually what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And so I think there's ways you can deliver the passenger briefing when you have a nervous or apprehensive passenger. It's one thing to, I don't know, there's levels, the normal sort of safety briefing that you would give somebody, great. But if you're getting into like, well, okay, so I might have you crack the door if we're doing a forced landing, so the whole airframe doesn't like sort of crumple and then we'd be trapped in right because of a fire. And then we would, you have to sort of find the sweet spot.
That's right. I completely agree. I like to start with the classic no smoking despite these beautiful ashtrays joke, because that's like the thing in all these airplanes. Like the passengers always want to point out to me like, well, why there's ashtrays here? Like, Yeah. So I've worked that into my opening shtick for just about everybody. It's just such a funny thing to still, you're still supposed to tell people that, which is kind of funny. But and also I love the seatbelts on during taxi, takeoff, and landing, but we might as well just leave them on the whole time because it's not like you're getting up and moving around the airplane while we're up there. So you might as well just leave your seatbelt on while we're.
Yeah. There's so many little things too, just about, it's like you want people in the front to feel like, that they're there with you and they're kind of loosely participating in the operation by just being there. But a lot of people are just like pushing the seat all the way back. They're like, I don't even want my feet anywhere near whatever those things are. And, all that. And I try to split the difference with them to say like, no, like, I'll let you put your hands on the controls here and you'll get a feel for it. It's different than just saying like, I'll let you fly.
Right.
That's a little bit much, but,
do you ask all your people to, watch for airplanes?
So, okay, I do, but I'm starting to wonder if that's a good idea.
Oh, really?
Well, of course it's a good idea. I guess it depends on who it is, but I do ask them, and I've done the thing where it's like, I'll buy you a beer for every, sort of aircraft that you can spot before me or, something along those lines. But it ends up being while you're in the plane, you're hearing somebody on the radio that's on the crosswind or, whatever. And you just start looking, and you try to get them to do sort of 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock. That starts to go, even that's too much for some people.
Right.
I don't want them to feel like they have the responsibility of it. And I don't want them to feel like, there's no chance I'm ever going to see all this traffic. I'm going to need your help. Which in a way it's kind of true, but, if they're nervous, I try to say, hey, if you see something, say something. And in the talking part of the safety brief too, I always say, we're going to limit our conversation during crucial phases of flight, which are, takeoff, landing and such. And, but if you see something, say something. And it doesn't, I've had people call out reflections as other aircraft and they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, it's fine. I can't see half the time what I'm looking at anyway.
Right. Let's see. I'm looking for comments now. You good to move on some stuff here?
Yeah, I would love to hear anybody's pro tips on accommodating nervous folks.
Ben Singer asks a good question. Have you flown with someone where something happened and you were more nervous than your passenger? It happened to me a few weeks ago, he says.
Oh, now I got to hear the rest of the story.
Yeah, I know. I want to hear that too. I don't think I've had any real unusual. I don't have anything that has been an unusual or unsafe condition. Honestly, Kevin, who's in the chat with me, my first ever passenger, was probably the most interesting thing that's happened with the passenger. Was that very first landing. We were trying to fly into Elkins, and I was so gung ho to have a passenger. I mean, this was a huge, this was a big deal, and it was a kind of an interesting approach. They have crossing runways, and it's over this guy's farm, and the final approach is like over a barn. I mean, it's just like you might as well. You could land in his barn if you wanted. I mean, it's close, to the. And so I was high, like really high, and we were coming in high, and I was trying to make it work, and I can't slip in that Cessna with flaps, and I was like, and eventually made the decision to go around, probably later than we should have. And what hit me as we're accelerating, like down, like climbing back out from there, I was thinking to myself, I didn't even look ahead to see what like the departure path of this runway looks like. So I'm like looking around, like, well, there is terrain like everywhere here, and like, but then I thought people take off that runway all the time, so you've got to be able to outclimb it, right? But it was just one of those moments where I had like realized I did not really think this through, like what my plan of attack was going to be here if things didn't go. Of course, everything was completely fine and well within every margin, and everything was fine. But it was, I was probably more nervous about it there for a moment, maybe than he was, going out of there. Like, what are we going to do here exactly? It worked out great. Yeah,
he said that you were going fast as well. Yeah.
The mower. Yeah, there was also a guy mowing like right beside the runway as well. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Is there something you ever forgot to do, or, something procedurally or something where it's almost like I'm projecting here. I'll tell you what mine is, but I guess I was going to see if you had one where like you forgot to do something or did something wrong, and your instinct actually is, when you catch yourself, is almost like to sort of own up to the CFI that's not there. and then you're just like, yeah, I did that.
I did something. I didn't have a passenger with me, but I breezed over. I got guilty of breezing through some checklists, and it's not a huge deal again, but it's one of those things you think could have been. I took off in the 172 with fuel selector not on both. So just on one tank or the other, which is, again, I mean, they both had 15 gallons of fuel, so it's fine. But also, it's only fine because it was fine. It's not fine because I checked it or had any realization of what fuel tank I was on. You know what I mean? It was one of those moments. So I'm like climbing out, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to switch it now. I mean, like we're going to stay there till we're like on final at Clarksburg when we get the runway made, and then we'll put it back to both. But so yeah, stuff like that. I mean, it flipped me out. It was way early in my time. These old guys with more experience are like, "What's your problem, dude? That's
right,
really fine."
Well, it's one of those things where it's not about the actual thing that you forgot. It's about, if I'm capable of forgetting that, what else am I capable of forgetting?
Yeah,
it's not. Yeah, mine was it was a pretty short-ish runway for what I'm used to. Probably closer to what your home airport is, or a little bit something like that, 3,000 feet. But it was, obstacle, trees, nothing crazy, but it wasn't really enough to warrant necessarily like a full on short field takeoff, but it was definitely warranting climbing out at VX, and just being, certain that you're getting into the climb. And so we take off and we're in, and I'm telling my passenger, like, this is going to be a little bit steeper of a climb than maybe what you're used to or whatever in the few flights that you've had. And we get into that. And then while we're in VX and climbing out and I'm getting over these trees and out over this water, I looked down and I had not put the mixture back to ridge, and probably not the hugest deal, but I mean, it's like, that's how, as far as I understand, that's how the engine's going to get really hot. And if I'm also flying at VX, there's not as much airflow and it's maxed out climb situation. Just for a second, it just jarred me because I was like, man, like, why, how did I miss that? That's, you know, it wasn't the end of the world or anything. It was just sort of like, oh, and so I guess my point is, relative to this nervous passenger thing, is it's funny when you have these moments by like in your head about what's going on. And I'm not going to be like, oh, you're not going to believe what I forgot here. I got it. No worries. But, you know, isn't that funny?
So I forgot the other night, actually during those 235 landings, you know, gas undercarriage mixture props forward. So in our 235, I'm typically on base or base to final before I'm pushing the prop forward, because I don't like to advance it until after the throttle's pulled enough back that it's off the governor, which if you haven't flown, you'll feel what that means later. But like, I forgot to put the prop forward on one of our touch and goes. The implication would have been that had I not caught it before we went to go on the runway, I could have, I mean, fortunately, we weren't pulling the prop back very far, but I could have. First of all, it's bad to have that much manifold pressure with a slower prop, but also you sacrifice some climb performance. But I just happened to feel like one of my things after we touched down, I put the flaps up, is I just pushed the mixture and prop again, just as with my hand, and I'm like, that prop went like an inch worth of move there. So I'm glad we caught that just now before we left, and then we took off and everything was fine. It's easy to do. And I've gotten sloppy with the mixture in the 172 particularly, because our little 172 is so underpowered, that 140 horsepower.
Oh yeah.
That in the summer, I'm constantly leaning for best performance. Like even if it's even remotely warm, like if it's 70 degrees or more, I'm like running it up to full power and like leaning some on the runway just to get every last RPM.
5.2 Lima is 140 horsepower.
Yeah, it barely goes. I mean, you barely get off the ground.
Wow. And you've had people ride in that plane with you?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, there have been many occasions where there's been three of us, me and my daughter and my wife. And I wouldn't put three of me in it.
I mean, on a summer day?
No, heck no.
Yeah. I mean, you know, so somebody's sitting here, David, hey, David, if passengers comfortable, have them help with checklists. I've done some of that. There's a pro and a con to that. I can see one. I think it depends on the type of passenger. Some, you know, it's a constructive but non-volatile way for them to be involved. At the same time, you've got to, it's kind of like they're reading the checklist, but you already know the checklist, and then you're going to double check the checklist anyway. So it's like, okay, it's kind of like, you know, your parents telling you you're the best tree in the play or whatever. But, but all that being said, there's, I think, a lot of passengers where, not a lot, there's been a few where I've done that, and you could kind of tell they were like, you could sense just a little bit of like, like now I got to do, can you just, you know, they're not saying it. They want to play along.
Yeah.
But,
you gotta read the room. But I do it too. I do it too with people that are comfortable with it. And like Cecilia, you know, you have your repeat customers who are like, she knows her jobs now. Like she's like, program the transponder, do the checklists, like
clear the landing.
Right. She's got her things that she's super.
The only other thing I was going to say about that too is just that if you have somebody that's got any kind of motion sickness, obviously that would be like an opportunity to have them look outside as opposed to look at checklists. But obviously, David, you know that. But that's a great suggestion.
Fur geeks, I have a bad habit of saying, "Oh shit," when my flare isn't perfect, and I've realized that it really makes my passenger uncomfortable. Hey, you guys, I have shielded the YouTube audience. Cecilia would attest. We've got to have her as a guest on here. She would attest. You know what I edit? Okay, here's an inside baseball trick. I often am muting the intercom audio on landings and at other times where I don't want you to hear what I'm saying, but I also don't want to make it clear that where I'm actually saying anything. Like there's a lot of content that you don't hear that actually happens. I went through a phase where just about every landing I was making some kind of like, ooh, it's good. Yeah. Like I was constantly, and Cecilia would look at me and be like, it's what's the problem? Like she's looking outside going like, this is fine. Like, and it was, but I did that constantly. And I just started realizing that's not a good habit. Like that's a terrible thing to get into the habit of doing. Like, because the wrong people, you can't just like, no.
So that audio never hit the GoPros or anything? So
it was not captured. Audio recorder. Oh, I have it. Oh yeah.
Oh, you have it. Oh, the audio recorder. That's right. So
I just never put the final.
I would like to be the first to ask for a Christmas present. That would be that you post a video that is just a supercut of just all of them.
Oh God, it would be 20 minutes of just those. Probably.
Yes, and I'm here for it. Let's do it.
Here's Ben Singer's story from earlier when he was asking about something that happened with a pastor but you were more scared than they were. Oops, hold on, don't read that yet. Let's go back. I was taking my wife on a surprise trip to Florida. Had to shoot an instrument approach, and the winds were 12 gusting to 20, slightly offset from the runway. And there were seagulls that I had to avoid after I broke out of the clouds. My wife was busy reading a magazine, and I was sweating it out. Yeah, I bet. That's crazy.
Yeah, I haven't had the instrument level passenger situation. I will say, a side note, not really related to anything to do with this podcast, but it's just a funny little tidbit. When I was in college, I was dating this girl, and we were on our first, I guess we've been going out for just a month or less. And we decided to take this road trip somewhere. I don't even remember anymore. And she was in the passenger seat of the car, and she had her feet up sort of like on the dash, summertime. And she was reading a book or doing something on this road trip while we were driving, and I was driving. And we got behind one of those. You ever see those, like the trucks that are towing the other cab truck, but inverse? Where like so you're in the fast lane on the interstate, looking at the grill of a Peterbilt. And I'm a bad person, but I just went, oh my God! And then she looked up and saw the grill of a Peterbilt right in front of us, and she twitched and contorted and screamed in ways that you could only imagine would be if someone really thought they were taking their last breath. And I laughed so hard for so long, and I felt so bad about it, because really what was funny about it was just that in a completely innocuous situation, she was, for that split second, 100% convinced that she was not going to be on this earth anymore. Right. And I thought that was hilarious, but I'm also maybe not a great person.
No, I like it. I took Cecilia on a little. We weren't zero G certainly, but we were doing a flight a couple weeks ago, and we had to climb. We had been restricted. There were traffic leaving Clarksburg, so we had to climb like 1,000 feet, and I had tons of airspeed. And I was like, man, I don't really want to fix all my things and fix my prop and power up. So I'm like, I'll trade some of the speed. So I pulled way back. And so like we, nosed up and we're climbing. Of course, we're slowing down dramatically too. And so we get to the top, and I'm just like, whew, and like, down. It's like, whoa. And she looked at me and she's like, I said, oh, you didn't like that? And she's like, no, do not do that again. I said, okay, I'm sorry. I thought it would be fun there for a second.
Just slowing down. It's kind of like, it's either a choice, that or all the flaps,
Yeah, she hates that too, for sure.
Exactly. So yeah, we've got One Dull Geek seconding my request for you to make a supercut 20-minute of you freaking out, deleted audio landing.
I see it.
I really think this is good. Oh, you didn't put it up on the screen, I see, because you just didn't want to support that.
Pretending like it didn't happen.
You're going to
Andy, do you know if there's a formal safety brief for pilots in general, especially for student pilots, something written out? I don't know. Do you?
A formal safety brief for pilots in general, especially for student pilots. That's so a student pilot's not going to be taking a passenger, but it is good.
Do it on a check ride.
Right. So I briefed my CFI on every flight about not just. And we should sort of bifurcate the safety brief versus sort of briefing emergency procedures, for various loss of thrust and those kind of things. So as far as formal safety brief, there's the safety acronym. There's a million videos on YouTube or articles anywhere on the interwebs. But the safety acronym, so it's basically, what is it? Seatbelts, and all of the environmental controls, fire extinguisher, sort of like entry, egress, doors, latches, all of that. And then you got T for talking, no talking during
What's
crucial
the
phases of
acronym?
flight. Safety, SAFETY. You never heard that one? So you can find videos all over the place that break this one down, and I've found it to be pretty easy to remember. Although it's one of those acronyms where a lot of the stuff just doesn't really line up letter-wise in a nice, neat way. You can see that people kind of forced it. Only a pilot will get to the point where you start to kind of be a sort of aficionado of acronyms and like whether they really feel natural or forced. But anyway, safety acronym is the one. And so, yeah, T for talking, and then Y for any questions. But anyway, go ahead.
The any, yeah. So acronyms are big in aviation, but I've also found they are bigger. So I left my job of like 25 years this past year and started a new career as a defense subcontractor. And so I will tell you that in that world, the military world, the acronyms are, they make aviation's acronyms look silly. Like every other word is an acronym. So I'm 6 months into this job, 6 months in, and still trying to learn all these acronyms. So it's,
will you tell us all the acronyms now on live YouTube?
I will not be able to do that.
That was a test.
At this moment. I passed.
Yes. So the thing about, again, like with the safety briefing, I think that's a good thing because you can get the nervous passenger to sort of put their hands on some of the things in a non-volatile. You do it not when the engine is running. You do it before you even start. But when you're saying like, here's where the heat is, and you can show them where the pullout is for that valve, like that's a nice little thing to, once they kind of get their hands on some of the switches and kind of actuate some of the things inside the plane, it's just a way for them to tangibly, I think, get more set
right
in the plane. I think that does help their baseline kind of mental state.
Mike says, great what you guys are doing. I started training for my private at 51 and happy to hear I'm not alone in the challenges. Hashtag CFI half my age.
Oh yeah.
It's true. Oh yeah. I mean, that was our case too.
Yeah, it's like, wow, he could be my son. He might be my son.
Fergeeks, I'm a Navy civilian. I agree. Acronyms are out of control.
You can just say OOC.
Oh, look, focus. There we go. Let's see. What else have we missed here?
It's like you just did that with your mind.
How many go-backs here that we missed?
Midlife pilot, hard knocks.
Yeah. Kevin said when we were talking about briefing passengers about like how it's like to be in a plane or motion sickness, ask them if they're good in a 60s Beetle on a country dirt road. Then imagine if that was at 10,000 feet. Accurate. How about a script flip, says Indiana Penny. Ever have any passengers that make you, as the pilot, more nervous?
Ooh. I will say, okay, here's one that I have not encountered that, but my short answer would be, I'm apprehensive about taking any small children up. And it's not that I went up in a plane as an infant. But that I feel like if the younger the child in the plane, the more sort of not nervous, but just kind of like maybe a little nervous. Maybe that's just me and I haven't done it a lot yet.
So part of my whole imposter syndrome / not belonging in the pilots club thing, flying with other pilots for me is a nerve-wracking experience because I feel like I have to perform. I feel like that's a good one. Yeah, I'm not adequate. I'm not worthy enough to be flying. So I still have a hard time. It gets easier the more you do it with someone or you become friends with people, like Dave. I'm getting a lot more comfortable with Dave, flying with him, and Cody and I took that trip to Oshkosh. And so that was a long time in the plane with a person.
Yeah.
But I think those initial ones are always like, you feel like, and we shouldn't feel that way. I think that's part of, that's like, that is not, in this context, it's not a hazardous attitude situation. It's not an ego thing for me. Like, I'm not trying to prove I'm a better pilot. My problem is the opposite. I feel like I'm inadequate. Like, I can't, I don't want to make a mistake to make it, Yeah. Anyway, it's just a psychological thing.
Totally get that. In my recent experience flying with also another new pilot, not as new as I am, but newer, within a year or the year. We just had sort of an agreement up front of to kind of squash that before we even got started. To just say, we're both here to get better. We also should be comfortable, right? And we're both still new at this. And he was a little bit rusty. It had been a couple months because he had a child and stuff. So bigger things going on. And so, my whole thing was, tell me if I forget something, correct me all day. And then I think if you can have that, I did the same thing with him. There were a couple times where I was sort of like, I feel like, airspeed is getting on the base or the downwind to base term is not where I think it should be. And it made me a little nervous, with a little nose up, a little slow, not a little uncoordinated. And, so I just wanted to point that out. Let's try to maybe tighten those up, not like I'm some CFI. I'm just really not interested in dying.
Right.
And at the hand of someone else, especially when I'm like, I knew he wasn't coordinated.
Right. Yeah. We had a similar thing when I flew with Dave the other night, that crazy approach into Fairmont where we had to get out of the way of a plane and cross over the field. And now we're right traffic in the 235. So we're going 115 knots, everything's fast, and it's, we're trying to get configured for and it's dark, it's nighttime. I can't see the terrain. So I'm like, we're making an abruptish pattern, not abruptish, but everything's condensed now. So you're doing your memory check items and you're doing this. So I told Dave at some point, I said, if there's anything at all that you are not comfortable with, speak up and let's just go around and do this again. We'll just fix it. And that kind of happened. It's so funny. You scramble and scramble and scramble, right? And then you're on final and everything slows down. It's just okay, now we can just focus on getting it in there. But I said that to him, not because I did not feel unsafe at the moment. I mean, I would have just went around and done something different or flew away from the situation. But there were a lot of things happening very quickly. We weren't recording, so I didn't have any cameras, but it was bam, bam, bam for me. Some of these guys fly really fast planes, and things happen much faster. But it's still, for me, this 235, it's a lot faster at one. Our base, we're flying base at 100 miles an hour and turning final, between 90 and 100 miles an hour. So that's surprisingly faster than 70 or 70 to 80 miles an hour.
Definitely noticeable. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's just, things happen much faster.
It's more like you're maneuvering as opposed to just sort of lollygagging.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you do on a 172 sometimes.
Student aviator says, had a rear passenger today during check ride training. Certainly made it different. That rear passenger today is a brand new pilot as well. I did that some during my training, very rarely. Cecilia came with us a couple times. A couple people came Rebecca went with us on a cross country once, to Parkersburg. Only a handful of occasions did I had people with me when training, mainly because the performance of the airplane. I mean, there were days that would have made it very difficult.
Well, so Mike there, talking about the rear passenger being a brand new pilot. So he's preparing for his check ride coming up in a couple weeks, I believe. So that's got to be an interesting, even particular sort of place where because I just remember I'm talking about it like I'm so wistful, like it was back when I was young. And this is back in September. I
remember like it was yesterday.
Yeah, really, it's like I can still. It's like I'm right there. But
we need music, and like a flashback sequence, and we'll show the video.
Oh yeah, not even. Yeah. So I remember just that 3 week 2 weeks before the check ride, like everything kind of starts to compress. And, by the way, if anybody didn't check out our last episode about, was that our last episode? Yeah. The check ride, sort of, I guess some tips and tricks and just sort of some funny observations. But also just kind of just saying, hey, it's actually really not that big of a deal. Of course, it's like the kid who just got the shot from a doctor coming out and be like, it's no big deal. Cause they already went through all the terror. And so they're just relieved. I don't know. Maybe we did people a disservice, Chris.
Honestly, I wish someone would have told me, and not that it would have made any difference, because it's a neurotic, not neurotic, but I would have still been as OCD about it. I wish I would have had people to talk to that would have said, you're making it up to be way bigger of a deal than it is. I think most people do that in most things that are big in their life, right? I mean, I don't think it's unique to this process of becoming a private pilot. I think we build things up unhealthily to things that they're not. It's just nice to hear actual anecdotal, like people who just have done it say, I made this, I spent so much time worrying, and it was not that at all. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. I digress.
Yeah, no, it's good. I like what One Dull Geek just said here. He says, you think you demystified the check ride, and what I think you did the last time was confirm my fears of the check ride. I mean, look, be afraid, be very afraid, be whatever it takes to get up for the challenge, I guess, but you're going to do fine. And, if you don't get it right, you will eventually. Like, it's not like you get shut, they're not going to take your plane from you. So,
right.
Keep the stakes in mind, but it is, you've put so much energy into something. You want to be a craftsman about it. You want to do it right. But back to the thing with us, student aviator there, I think, 2 weeks from today at check ride, I can't imagine, I would like very much having a rear passenger that had just been through that when I'm just getting ready to shrink my focused tunnel vision down to being like going through that gauntlet. That seems kind of interesting, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where flying with other people, I think, should be always a good thing. And I think if you don't feel good with somebody, I mean, maybe that's a really good question I have is if I wish I had somebody to ask, maybe I can ask you, Chris, what if you don't want to fly with somebody? What if it's like they're a totally nice person and you have all the same interests and they're at your airport or whatever. Like
another pilot? Like if you don't want to go fly with another pilot?
Yeah. Like where you're just like, I see enough about this person's character. I can read other aspects of them. I don't know, whatever it would be, where you're just like, I don't want to fly with them. And how do you get around that?
I mean, you can find ways to not do it. I mean, we do that with everything else in our life, right? I mean,
it's so Southern, right? We can't be honest. We have to lie.
Yeah, we can't tell them the truth. I know people that I don't want to fly with, I think. I'm
sitting right here.
Not you. We've got to hook that up at some point. Yeah. I think, there's two ways to look at it. I think you could say, well, the responsible thing to do would be have a discussion with them about why. I mean, to not say something to them about it is almost complacent. If you really feel like they're a risk to themselves or others. I mean, if we were going to be absolute purist about our intentions, right, it would be like the appropriate thing would probably be to say something. But also, my God, how do you do that? I mean, unless it is egregious. I mean, unless it's an egregiously obvious I don't know, man. I would just find ways to avoid the circumstance that would lead me to do that.
And student aviator is saying that he thinks I'm talking about him. I would be happy to fly with you, sir, because you've actually flown a lot of different planes. You've done a lot of different things. I mean, you are a little, maybe brave sometimes, but I would trust that you would take it easy if I was around.
One Dull Geek says, to be honest, if I were him, I'd be scared to fly with me too. Oh, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. Yeah, I guess the takeaway then is the best thing you can do I mean, there's ways to handle folks who are nervous, and I think engaging is a key one. Whatever that looks like to them, you got to read the room, though. That's part of it. Is you've got to be able to read and know your passenger. Like, engage them in ways that are appropriate for them and for you and for the circumstance. Don't over engage. I also like your point, Brian, about don't make them feel like they're responsible somehow for the safety of the operation. Like, because I do that with just about everybody. I'm like, you can really help me by looking for other airplanes. I've never really given it thought that I may be putting, the burden on them in some ways of making them feel like they're responsible for that. So that's just something to think about when you're approaching that.
Yeah, if they're a certain type of person might be predisposed, I think, to feel that way. Like, now I got to do things too. But yeah, certainly don't wait until you're actually in the plane with them. That's good. Yeah. Yeah, man. So I think there's a lot to walk away with there. I feel like I've learned actually a couple things in this conversation, Chris. So I hope that you feel the same. For sure. I look forward to this. I like the 2-week schedule. This is going to be a good cycle, I think, for us to make these happen. Certainly, if you're listening to this as a podcast or watching online, do find it on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe. We would be very grateful for those subscriptions and also for any reviews or comments on your podcast platform of choice. And these are great places to submit topic ideas. You can do that here in these chats. You can also email anytime themidlifepilot@gmail.com, themidlifepilot@gmail.com, if you have topic suggestions or other kind of content suggestions going forward. I think we need to have some strategic planning meetings maybe about scheduling some of these out and then maybe starting to talk about some guests. I know we have a pretty good network of people, I think, who would be willing to participate and kind of provide some unique insight. Potentially some other YouTubers, even some who are in some of these chats with us. I think the more the merrier, the more voices, the better. I just think it's a community thing that we're doing here. And so, anyway, yes, absolutely. Indiana, that's a good point. Good luck. We may not talk to you. We may not talk to Student Aviator before his check ride in 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks from today, we will. If he makes the show that Wednesday night, 2 weeks from today, we'll definitely want to hear the results of the check ride. We'll say some happy 4-letter words for sure. That's awesome. Well, thank you for making a podcast with me tonight. That's very Mr. Rogers of you. It's no, not gonna do it. Oh, by the way, the other thing is, I noticed that on the iTunes thing, I think some people, or at least one person, has left some reviews, and I think that's something that helps. So if you go to the iTunes thing and press all the buttons and say it's this good or whatever, I think you can put words in or something, and then that helps. Also, it is now mandatory. You've got to get a synth out. That's got to be part of the show now. You've got to play us out of play some pads and stuff out of things going forward. Not tonight, but in future. Okay, good, because I'm not really set up right now. It's all fair. But yeah, cool. Well, thanks everybody, and oh God, this is okay. Let's. Sorry, I know we're trying to wrap this up. One dog. Really? iTunes, Brian. iTunes? You mean Apple Podcasts? Or whatever. Or is he mocking you for because he knows you're... whatever Apple's rebranded their latest mediocre effort as. Go to Apple Podcasts or wherever, I guess whatever the Google thing is. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. We appreciate your time, and thanks for listening. And we'll talk to you all in a couple weeks. Goodbye, Brian. See you, man. Thanks, everybody.